Moonlight silvered the marriage dais, turning the old bloodstains in the stone pale as frost. Arabella stood in torn white ceremonial silk, bare feet numb against winter granite, while 200 blood moon wolves watched her with the hungry stillness of a pack waiting for a throat to open. Dante stood opposite her in black formal leathers, jaw carved hard, moonmark bright on his neck where she had once kissed him before council nights. Her wolf paced under her skin, anxious but hopeful. This was supposed to be the claiming rite, the night he named her Luna before the gathered territories. Instead, Dante raised the ceremonial blade, turned it in his palm, and sliced across his own wrist. Not the joining cut, the severance cut. Gasps rippled through the courtyard. Arabella froze. "No," she whispered. "Dante, what are you?" "I, Dante Bloodmoon, alpha of this pack, reject Arabella Shadowfang as mate before moon and witness." His voice carried cleanly, amplified by alpha command. "I sever blood, title, and future claim." Pain hit her a heartbeat later, a blinding white wire ripping from sternum to spine as the half-formed mate thread tore raw. Her knees buckled. She caught herself on the altar stone, fingers slipping in his blood. "Please," she rasped, looking up at him. "If this is politics, if someone forced—" "No one forced me." His lip curled. "Your bloodline is a curse the moon should have buried." The words struck harder than the severance. Arabella heard the crowd murmur, smelled approval and fear and sharp excitement. She knew those scents. Pack courts loved a public ruin. Elder Mira stepped forward with a bone scroll case and held it out to Dante. He broke the wax seal, then spoke like he was reading market terms. "For 12 seasons our border wards have held because my inner circle performs protection rites." He looked directly at Arabella. "Those rites require firstborn tribute from Luna blood. You would have surrendered your first child to the circle at moonrise, as agreed in private contract." The world narrowed to a ringing hum. "What contract?" "Your assent was implied when you accepted mating negotiations." "I never—" Her voice cracked. "You asked me to strengthen patrol lines and winter stores. You never said child sacrifice." A male in the front row barked laughter. Another called. She thought she was being crowned. Dante lifted his chin. "You refuse tribute. You jeopardize every den, every pup, every border stone. Therefore, I name you disloyal to pack survival." Arabella shook her head violently. "There is no moon law that allows—" "There is my law," Dante snapped. Then, loudly, for everyone. "And she is barren besides." The courtyard erupted. Shock, then vicious delight. Barren, unfit, useless. She felt the words land like stones. Her wolf howled inside her, frantic, wounded, not from insult but from the lie. Dante knew she wasn't barren. He had stood over her after the healer's spring exam, kissing her shoulder and whispering, "We'll have strong sons." He knew. He lied anyway. An attendant yanked the bridal mantle from Arabella's shoulders so hard the ties cut skin. Someone flung funeral ash. Gray powder struck her face, stung her eyes, clung wet to her lips. Another handful hit her hair. Then more. Soon she was breathing dust and old bone, while wolves she had fed through famine, patched after rogue raids, and defended in council watched in silence. "Look at her," Elder Mira called. "Shadowfang pride in white cloth." A young she-wolf she'd mentored spat near Arabella's feet. "Traitor." Hands seized her arms from behind, dais slowly until they were eye level. His knuckles were cold as riverstone. Arabella twisted once, more instinct than hope, and got a knuckle in her ribs for it. Dante descended the dais slowly until they were eye level. His scent was cedar, steel, and that metallic bite she'd started noticing these past months. Burnt blood and incense from the inner circle chambers he never let her enter. "You had one duty," he said quietly, so only she could hear. Give me heirs and give me obedience. I would have given you everything but a child's throat. Then you are nothing. He stepped back and lifted his voice. By my authority, Arabella Shadowfang will be presented to the Alpha King at first light for sentence as traitor. I petition execution. A roar of approval answered him. Arabella swallowed ash and blood and looked up at the moon, hoping for anything. Omen, mercy, thunder. A sign she wasn't losing her mind in front of everyone she'd called home. The moon looked back, blank and bright. They dragged her down the courtyard steps, wedding silk tearing on stone, and threw her into the old holding den beneath the east tower, where condemned wolves waited for dawn judgments. The door clanged shut. Darkness swallowed her. For a long time she sat where she'd fallen, wrists chained to a ring bolt, chest spasming with every breath where the severed bond still burned. Her throat tasted like soot. Her palms shook so hard she couldn't wipe the ash from her eyes. Above, feet thudded overhead, distant laughter rising and falling. Celebration. Her rejection feast was underway. At some hour deep in the night, she heard the wardens outside her door. King won't even question it, one male said. Dante presents right records. She swings. Or Circle takes her first, the other replied. Mira wants the womb mark burned in before transport. Make an example. Arabella went still. The first one snorted. Waste of silver for a barren female. Doesn't matter. Mira says the mark warns others. Refuse tribute. Lose your bloodline. Bootsteps approached. Keys scraped. Panic lit clean and cold through her exhaustion. This was the breaking point, sharp as a blade. If they marked her here, in the underground, she would arrive before the Alpha King already proven, already branded by cult law dressed as pack custom. No hearing. No chance. The door swung inward. A warden entered with a brazier and iron brand glowing orange at the tip. Spiraled runes had been forged into it, the same spiral she'd seen once carved into a nursery lintel in a border village where 3 infants had vanished. No, she whispered, backing against the wall as far as the chain allowed. Moon law forbids forced marking before trial. He grinned. Dante law doesn't. He lunged. Arabella moved before thought caught up, driven by pure wolf reflex. She kicked the brazier. Coals exploded across the floor, one embedding in his calf. He shouted, dropping the brand. She surged up, chain taut, and slammed her bound wrists into his throat. Cartilage crunched. He staggered. The second warden rushed in. Smoke filled the cell, hot and metallic. Arabella dove low, grabbed the fallen brand with both shackled hands, and drove the glowing tip into his forearm. He screamed, rearing back, and she used the momentum to yank his keyring free. Her fingers were clumsy, burned, slick with sweat. One key, wrong. Another, wrong. Behind her, the first warden was coughing, trying to stand. Third key. The cuff sprang open. Arabella didn't wait to free the other wrist neatly. She tore, skin ripping, and bolted through the smoke, one iron cuff still hanging from her left arm. She ran half-blind through the corridor, alarm bell beginning to clang above as someone finally smelled fire. She took the servant stairs because noble corridors would already be blocked. Up, up, lungs searing, bare feet slapping wet stone. She burst into the storm courtyard as rain came down in sheets, instantly turning ash to mud on her skin. Wolves shouted from 3 directions. She veered toward the old herb gate near the infirmary, unwarded during festivals, a flaw she had argued to repair for months. No one listened then. Tonight it saved her life. She squeezed through broken iron, ripping her shoulder, and plunged into the tree line. Branches whipped her face. Mud sucked at her feet. Behind her came howls, pursuit call, 2-note, lethal. Don't run wild, she told herself. Think. The nearest safe law was not a neighboring pack. Dante had favors and fear there. The only authority above an alpha with a personal vendetta was the Crown Den at High Court Ridge, where the Alpha King held eclipse tribunal in winter. 30 miles through storm and ravine while hunted. Arabella ran anyway. She crossed Blackroot Creek at chest depth, current slamming her into submerged rock hard enough to bruise bone. Breaks to confuse trackers, leaving blood breaks to confuse trackers, leaving blood and wetting silk strips tangled in briars like ghost flags. By dawn, her calves trembled so violently she nearly fell every dozen strides. By noon, the pursuit howls faded to distant echoes. By dusk, she could no longer smell blood moon wolves at all, only pine pitch, cold stone, and the faint iron tang of crown warding on the wind. She stumbled into High Court territory after moonrise, crossing a boundary marker of black obsidian carved with the king's sigil, a crowned crescent over crossed claws. The ward line prickled over her skin, testing intent. She forced herself upright and spoke through cracked lips. Arabella Shadowfang, Sanctuary Petition, Trial by Crown Law. Nothing happened. Then spear points glinted in the dark. 6 royal sentinels emerged from the pines in seamless formation, silver thread cloaks shedding rain, eyes wolf-bright. Their captain, a broad-shouldered woman with a white scar down her cheek, took one look at Arabella's torn dress, shackled wrist, and ash-streaked face. Hands where I can see them. Arabella lifted her arms. The dangling cuff clinked weakly. I request... She swayed. Request hearing before the Alpha King. Dante Bloodmoon filed execution petition. It's false. There are child rights. Her knees gave out. The captain caught her before she hit stone, surprisingly gentle. Get a healer. And bind her? No. Wait. She sniffed once, sharply, reading scent truth. Her expression changed from suspicion to something colder. By moon, she's telling enough. A horn sounded from the ridge keep. 3 low notes. Tribunal summons. They hauled Arabella into the great hall wrapped in a rough wool blanket that smelled like cedar chests and smoke. Heat from central braziers made her skin ache as feeling returned. Nobles lined the perimeter in winter furs, whispers snapping like dry twigs as she passed. At the far end, on the raised basalt seat, sat the Alpha King. He was older than she expected, hair dark at the temples and silver at the crown, power-banked rather than flaunted. His gaze pinned her the way a mountain pins weather. Immovable, impersonal, final. To his right stood Dante Bloodmoon in immaculate black, as if he had not spent the night trying to brand her in a cell. Your Majesty, Dante said smoothly, bowing. Thank you for swift audience. The female before you committed treason against necessary ward rights and fled lawful custody. I request immediate execution to preserve border security. Arabella forced herself to her feet despite the room tilting. He lies. He demands firstborn infants for blood rituals. He calls it protection. Silence, barked Elder Mira from behind Dante, bone scroll case tucked under one arm. She had come too. Of course she had. The king raised one hand. Quiet dropped like a blade. He looked at Dante first. You filed for death. Yes, Majesty. Then at Arabella. You petitioned sanctuary and contest charges. Yes. Her voice shook but held. I refuse child tribute. If that is treason, your law is already dead. A murmur surged. Dante's nostrils flared. Majesty. She is unstable, recently severed and barren besides. Enough. The single word cracked across stone. The king stood. This court does not execute on contested ritual doctrine in winter session, and it does not recognize offspring tithe as automatic right. His gaze swept the hall, pinning Mira now. I smell cult incense beneath your pack oils. Do not insult me with painted necessity. Dante's mask slipped, fury flashing feral in his eyes. Without the rights, borders fail. Then sworn adults will bleed for their own walls. The king descended one step, voice low and lethal. Her life is no cult tithe. Silence. Arabella felt the words hit her like sudden warmth after days in snow. Painful, unbelievable. The king turned to his captain. Sentence: exile from Blood Moon, claim pending full eclipse inquiry. Transfer Arabella Shadowfang to Ironhold Ruins under Alpha Owen Ironhold's authority. Effective immediately. Ironhold. A broken territory on the eastern scar, half rebuilt, mostly forgotten. Dante took one sharp step forward. Majesty. Careful, Blood Moon. The king did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. I overruled your death petition. Do not make me revisit your title. Dante bowed stiffly, jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. Arabella exhaled for what felt like the first time all night, all day, all life. Exile wasn't freedom. It was uncertainty, danger, cold roads and strangers and whatever waited in ruined Ironhold. But it was breath. It was not a brand in a cell. The captain touched Arabella's elbow, guiding her toward the side doors where royal outriders waited in storm gear. Can you ride? Arabella looked back once. Dante watched her with flat, murderous promise, ash-dark eyes glittering in brazier light. Yeah, she said hoarsely, pulling the blanket tighter around her torn wedding whites. I can ride. And when the keep doors opened to the rain-slashed night, she stepped through them without looking back again. Rain hit her like thrown nails. Arabella hunched into the wool blanket and followed the royal captain down slick stone steps to the waiting horses. One outrider held a lantern low, another held out a water skin without comment. She drank, coughed, wiped her mouth with the back of her burned hand, and grabbed the saddle horn. The captain watched her mount. Ironhold is 2 hard days if the roads hold. Do they? Arabella asked. A humorless snort. No roads hold in winter. They rode anyway. The first night was all black pines and river mist, the sentinels moving like shadows around her in a shifting ring. No one asked her for details. No one offered pity. It felt strange and merciful at once. At dawn, they took shelter under a rock overhang while sleet rattled the valley, then rode again. The farther east they pushed, the rougher the land became. Old burned scars under new snow, half-toppled watchposts, wardstones split by something stronger than weather. By second dusk, Arabella's thighs shook with fatigue and her hands cramped around the reins. Then the trees thinned, and Ironhold came into view. Ruins first, a broken outer wall like jagged teeth against the sky. One tower collapsed inward, black stones furred with lichen. Then signs of stubborn life threaded through the wreckage. Fresh scaffolds of pine, patched roofs, smoke lifting from 2 rebuilt chimneys, wolves hauling timber by hand and shoulder in the freezing wind. Not dead then. Not yet. The captain signaled a halt at a shattered gate arch where old iron hinges hung twisted and useless. Ironhold boundary, she called. A male looked up from kneeling beside a stack of cut stone just inside the gate. He wore no formal leathers, only a dark work shirt with sleeves shoved to his elbows despite the cold, forearms scored with old scars and fresh mortar dust. His hair was tied back roughly. There was a hammer at his hip instead of a ceremonial blade. Owen Ironhold. Arabella had expected a polished exile keeper sent by the king to cage her quietly. A hard face, a measuring sneer. He stood, wiping one hand on his trousers, and turned toward the gate. The wind shifted. It hit her like a lightning strike under the ribs. Heat surged through her chest. Violent, immediate, impossible to mistake. Every nerve went bright. The air changed texture, suddenly thick with him. Cold stone, cedar smoke, iron, male wolf, and something that felt like coming home so fast her knees nearly buckled. Her wolf slammed to the front with a startled, aching whine, pressing against skin and bone as if she could leap free just to close the distance. No, 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 not now. Not after Dante. Arabella gripped the saddle so hard her burned palm screamed. The world narrowed until there was only the broken gate, the wind between them, and Owen's face as recognition struck him too. He went absolutely still. Then his pupils blew wide, gold flooding his irises in one sharp flash. He sucked in a breath like he'd been punched. The scent of his shock spiked. Wolf, hunger, disbelief. And then, just as quickly, iron discipline slammed down over it, lowering of his size. Arabella stared at lowering of his size. Arabella stared at him, heart battering against her ribs like it wanted out. Warmth kept pouring through the torn places inside her, where Dante's severance had left raw wire. It hurt and soothed at once. Too much, too soon. Her body knew what this was. Her wolf knew. Every old story knew. Second chance mate. She wanted to run. She wanted to bury her face in his throat and breathe until the shaking stopped. Both impulses terrified her. Owen kept his hands open and visible on his thighs. His voice came rough, scraped raw from whatever restraint cost him. Mine. The word vibrated through her like thunder. He swallowed, jaw flexing hard, and corrected himself with effort. If you choose me, not before. Silence crackled. Behind Arabella, one of the sentinels shifted in the saddle and looked away, giving privacy without pretending not to understand what had just happened. Arabella couldn't look away from Owen. Rain beaded on his lashes. A thin white scar cut through one eyebrow. There was grief in his scent beneath the new mate's shock, old and deep as winter ground, loss that had settled into him instead of leaving. Not a male untouched by pain then, a male shaped by it. Her throat worked. You kneel to all exiles at your gate? One corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Only the dangerous ones. I'm not dangerous. His gaze flicked to the still hanging cuff on her left wrist, to the healing burns on both palms, to the royal escort that had brought her armed through 2 days of storm. That's not what your file says. She almost laughed. Instead, she felt a wild, hysterical sting behind her eyes and clamped down on it. The captain dismounted, boots crunching. By order of the Alpha King, Arabella Shadowfang is remanded to Ironhold Authority pending Eclipse inquiry. She's under crown protection from Blood Moon claim. Owen did not look away from Arabella when he answered. Understood. Then, to her, still kneeling, voice quieter. You don't owe me eye contact. You don't owe me closeness. You don't owe me anything tonight. The bond hummed harder anyway, a live wire singing under her skin. She forced herself to swing down from the saddle. Her knees threatened mutiny when her boots hit ground. Owen twitched forward on pure instinct, caught himself, and stayed exactly where he was until she steadied. Good, some brittle part of her thought. Good. Keep your distance. Another part whispered, he's trying. Arabella dragged in a breath full of wet stone and him. I'm not here to be claimed. I know. He lifted his chin slightly toward the half-rebuilt walls behind him. You're here to survive. Against the broken gatepost while Arabella stood trembling in rain and shock and unwanted longing. When the formalities were done and the sentinels rode out, taking crown steel and certainty with them, Ironhold suddenly felt very quiet, very far from everything she knew. Owen glanced at her once more, then gestured toward the inner yard. Come in before you freeze. Arabella followed him through the shattered gate and into exile. By full dark, the temperature dropped hard enough to silver the puddles. Ironhold's central hall had half a roof and 3 working braziers. Wolves moved in practiced patterns around missing walls, carrying planks, ladling stew, checking maps weighted with nails. No one cheered her arrival. No one threw ash, either. Most stared once, caught Owen's expression, and went back to work. He gave her a small room in what had once been officer barracks. 1 repaired wall, 1 tarp wall, one narrow bed with blankets that smelled sun-dried and old. A cracked basin sat on a stool. Someone had left soap. Owen stayed in the doorway while she stood in the center of the room, like she'd forgotten how furniture worked. "You'll hear wind through the west side," he said. "Storm shutters are temporary. If they rattle, kick them. They'll settle." Arabella nodded because words felt dangerous. He held out a wrapped cloth bundle at arm's length. "Dry shirt, trousers. No obligation to wear anything from me. There are supply crates if you'd rather choose your own." She hesitated, then took the bundle. Their fingers did not touch. The bond flared anyway, hot enough to make her breath hitch. Owen looked at the floorboards instead of her face. "Healer can remove that cuff in the morning. If you want it off tonight, I can bring bolt cutters and leave them by the door. You trust me with steel? I trust you in your own room." The answer landed strangely in her chest. He started to step back. "Do you want tea, broth, or silence?" The options were so simple, so ordinary, that her eyes burned again. After Blood Moon's performance and Crown Tribunal and 2 days of hunted exhaustion, she had braced for interrogation, pity, politics. Something sharp. Not choice. "Silence," she whispered. Owen dipped his head once. Silence, then. He left, closing the door gently behind him. Arabella changed with shaking hands, peeled wet silk from scraped skin, and sat on the bed hugging her knees while wind moaned through the tarp seam. She meant to stay awake. She meant to remain in control of at least one thing. Sleep took her like a trapdoor opening. She was back on the moonlit dais, ash in her mouth, Dante's voice cutting through the crowd. Barren, disloyal, unfit. Only this time, the attendants held down not her arms, but a screaming child she couldn't see clearly, and Mira lowered the glowing brand toward tiny skin while wolves chanted protection, protection, protection. Arabella jerked awake with a strangled cry, claws half-shifted, hands at her own throat. The room was dark, wind hammering the barracks. Rain had found a seam in the ceiling and was pouring onto the far wall. One support plank had split. The tarp bulged inward with each gust like a lung. Panic flooded back in, blind and fast. She scrambled off the bed and hit the warped door with her shoulder. It stuck. She yanked harder, and it flew open into the corridor just as lightning split the sky. Owen was there already. Barefoot, shirtless, a blanket over one arm and a lantern in his hand. He stopped a full step away. "Arabella?" Her chest heaved. She couldn't make language happen. He lowered the lantern to the floor and spoke slowly, like approaching a cornered wolf. "You're safe." Storm popped the west brace. "May I come closer?" She stared at him, at the tension in his shoulders he kept leashed, at the way he left space between them despite the bond dragging at both of them like tide. Her claws retracted one painful notch. She managed a jerky nod. Only then did he move. He lifted the blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders without touching skin, tucking the edges in with careful knuckles. The warmth hit, and she swayed. "Breathe with me," he said quietly. He demonstrated, in for 4, hold, out slow. She followed because it was easier than drowning. Outside, thunder rolled over the ruins. Inside, her pulse gradually stopped trying to tear itself free. When she could speak, it came out rough. "I'm fine." "Of course." No mockery, no challenge. "Wall isn't." He picked up the lantern and nodded toward her room. Water streamed down the inside seam now. One corner of the ceiling sagged. "You can take my office bed," he said. "Driest room left." She glanced up sharply. "And you?" "I have other options." She didn't believe him, but she didn't have strength to argue. He fetched tools, wedged a brace under the sagging beam, and started rebuilding the split wall section right then, in the middle of the storm. Hammer strokes measured and steady between thunderclaps. After a minute, Arabella found herself holding the lantern for him, blanket clutched tight with one hand. Neither of them mentioned her nightmare. Neither of them mentioned the bond pulsing in every shared breath. They worked until dawn bled gray through the cracks. By then the wall held, the leak was reduced to a drip, and Owen's hair was plastered to his neck with rain and sweat. He straightened, rolled his shoulder once, and said, "It'll do till midday repair." Arabella set down the lantern. "You could have waited." He met her eyes. "You were shaking." Something dangerously soft moved through her. She chose defensiveness. "Don't mistake panic for weakness." "I don't." He gathered tools. "I mistake panic for panic." She had no answer to that. When he finally left her to wash and sleep, she noticed his office door open across the corridor. Dry bed untouched. Blanket folded. Later, when she woke near noon and stepped out for water, she found him asleep by her doorway in gray wolf form, curled on the stone threshold where any approach would wake him first. Guarding, not claiming. She stood there a long moment, looking at the scarred ridge of his shoulder and the way his ear twitched at her scent even in sleep. Confusion sat heavy and unfamiliar in her ribs. Trust did not bloom. It laid one cautious stone. 3 days later, Ironhold smelled like thawing mud, forge smoke, and bad tempers. A supply wagon from the southern pass had arrived short 2 barrels of grain, and hunger made everyone sharper at the edges. Arabella spent the morning inventorying medical stores with an older healer named Tamsin, who clicked her tongue at missing bandages and muttered that men forgot gauze existed until they were the ones bleeding. By afternoon, Arabella crossed the training yard, carrying split kindling when voices rose near the post ring. 3 displaced males from a fallen border den stood in a loose half-circle by the water trough, all broad shoulders and resentment. She recognized them. New arrivals, low on rank, quick to sneer, the kind who mistook cruelty for strength because fear had hollowed them out. One, a thick-necked wolf called Bren, jerked his chin at her as she passed. "There's your omen." Another spat into the mud. Dante was right. Harboring her invites war. Arabella kept walking. Bren stepped into her path. Close. Too close. His scent was stale adrenaline and challenge. "Heard you refused tribute and got your whole pack marked for death." The kindling shifted in her arms. "Move." "Or what?" He leaned in until his breath touched her cheek. "You'll cry to your new alpha?" The flinch came before she could stop it. Body memory, not fear of this male specifically. Bramblefast, humiliating. Bren grinned like he'd won something. A blur of motion slammed him sideways. Owen hit with enough force to crack the training post and drove Bren into it by the throat, forearm braced across his windpipe. The yard went silent in one breath. Even the hammering at the forge stopped. Owen's voice came out in full alpha command, low and thunderous. "Any wolf who threatens Arabella threatens me." Bren clawed at Owen's arm, choking. Owen's eyes flashed molten gold. "Any wolf who threatens me leaves Ironhold lands tonight." The words rolled across the yard like pressure, making lesser wolves drop gaze by instinct. The other 2 displaced males went pale and rigid. Arabella set the kindling down carefully so her hands would stop shaking. Owen released Bren just enough for him to gasp and hauled him upright by the front of his coat, then turned his head toward Arabella without stepping in front of her. He moved aside, not shielding, not using her as a prop. "Arabella," he said, voice still carrying, "your call. Apology, challenge, or exile." Every eye in the yard snapped to her. Power, offered publicly, could be another kind of trap. She knew that. Test the exile female. See if she overreaches. See if she breaks. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She looked at Bren, red-faced and furious, but suddenly very aware of whose land he stood on. She looked at the other 2. one avoiding her gaze, one pretending not to tremble. Barrels, broken walls, a pack stitched barrels, broken walls, a pack stitched from survivors and strangers. Apology, she said, then louder, steadying as she spoke. Public. To me and to every female in this yard you think you can corner. Then 3 weeks' labor on West Wall reconstruction under Tamsin's assignment list. A few startled snorts sounded from the watching wolves. Tamsin's labor list was legendary misery: hauling stone, lime mixing, latrine trenching, midnight infirmary watch. Bren's lip curled. That's healer work. Arabella met his glare. Then maybe you'll learn where strength actually lives. Owen's mouth went flat with what might have been approval. You heard her. Bren looked to Owen for override. There was none. Now, Owen said. Jaw jumping, Bren turned to Arabella. I apologize, he ground out. Louder. He bared his teeth, then forced the words. I apologize for threatening you. Arabella tipped her head toward the women by the forge, by the water line, by the map table. And? His nostrils flared. And for disrespecting any female on Ironhold land. The other two repeated their apologies without being asked. Owen released Bren fully and stepped back, not touching Arabella, not speaking over her verdict. Tamsin, he called. You get them at dusk. From across the yard, the old healer's grin was positively predatory. Oh, I will. Nervous laughter rippled through the onlookers, tension cracking open. Work resumed in pieces, hammer strikes, shouted measurements, bucket chains reforming. The world kept moving. Arabella bent to pick up her kindling again. Owen crouched first, gathered half the load, and rose. Permission to carry this to the kitchens? He asked, dead serious. To the kitchens, Arabella said. Very to the kitchens, Arabella said very quietly. Thank you. Owen glanced at her. For what? For not deciding for me in front of everyone. He was silent a beat. I won't decide for you in private either. The words settled deep, somewhere below scar tissue. Arabella nodded once. She did not trust him fully. Not yet. But when a gust of wind blew cold through the ruined archway and instinct told her to brace for impact, she found herself not stepping away from him this time. Not closer, exactly. Just not away. Not closer, exactly. Just not away. By the time they reached the kitchen lean-to, dusk had gone bruised purple over Ironhold's broken towers. Wolves moved around them with armloads of timber and baskets of turnips. Ordinary labor stitched over old ruin. Arabella should have let that steadiness soothe her. Instead, she felt watched. Not by the workers, by something distant and patient, like a hunter testing wind. She set her kindling beside the cook fire and turned to leave when a horn blasted from the east watch. One long, two short. Not attack. Messenger. Owen was already moving. Hall. Now. The central hall filled fast, sentries dripping meltwater, builders with lime dust in their hair, Tamsin still wearing blood-specked gloves from stitching a split palm. Arabella took a place near the map table and caught 3 wary looks from wolves who still weren't sure what to do with her. No one told her to stand back. A scout staggered in under 2 others' shoulders, cloak soaked red at the hem. He was young, barely out of first-rank age, with a gash across his scalp and a wax-sealed tube clenched in one fist so hard his knuckles had gone white. From Grafen Border, he gasped, for Ironhold command, intercepted before Blood Moon riders could retrieve it. He thrust the tube at Owen, then crumpled to his knees while Tamsin swore and dragged him toward the brazier light. Bone wax. Arabella saw it before Owen cracked the seal. Yellowed, veined, pressed with a spiral sigil around a crescent. The same spiral from the brand, from the nursery lintel where infants had vanished. Her stomach turned cold. Owen unrolled the thin parchment and read once, expression flattening into carved stone. He handed it to Arabella without a word. The writing was Dante's, precise, elegant, merciless. To the wolves hiding in Ironhold ruin, you shelter oath filth and call it law. Surrender Arabella Shadowfang to Blood Moon custody and submit any child she bears to Circle Right. And I will permit your incomplete wards to stand through Blood Moon. Refuse, and I will unmake your border anchors myself. When ferals flood your dens, remember this. Mothers who deny the pack feed death instead. Kneel publicly, and I may teach mercy. Alpha Dante Blood Moon. Below the signature, in smeared dark brown, was a second line. 3 border pack names Arabella recognized, each crossed out. She looked up. Those packs. The scout, half conscious on the floor, choked out. Empty nurseries. 3 territories in 10 nights. They said rogues took them, but... He swallowed, eyes glassy with fever. Found ritual pits, tiny bones, burned with eclipse ash. The hall went dead silent. Someone whispered, "Moon have mercy." Owen took the parchment back and pinned it to the table with a knife. "Report everything." The scout's words came in jerks between pain and exhaustion. Villages on weak borders had started accepting Blood Moon protection instructors after rogue raids intensified. In exchange for temporary ward flares, Dante's inner circle demanded Firstborn oaths in private. Alphas who refused saw their boundaries fail within days. Alphas who agreed got 1 bright month of safety, then another demand, and another. Fear as currency, children as payment. Arabella felt her jaw lock. "He's engineering the raids." A gray-muzzled sentry looked at her sharply. "You can't know that." She met his gaze. "I can smell his incense on the letter." Same as the ritual chamber under Blood Moon Keep. He told the court the rites were necessary to keep borders sealed. They are necessary because he makes them fail. Owen nodded once, grim. Temporary ward flares, addictive protection. Manufactures scarcity, sell relief. He looked around the hall. That's not leadership. That's extortion. Another wolf, broad-hipped and scarred, muttered, "If he can drop wards from another territory, we're already dead." "Not dead," Arabella said before she could stop herself. Every face turned, her pulse hammered, but she kept going. "Compromised. There's a difference." Owen's eyes found hers, steady and intent. "Explain." She moved to the map, pushed aside a pile of nails, and tapped the outer stone markers sketched in charcoal. Ward networks are layered. Anchor stones, blood clauses, spoken oath. If Dante can disrupt yours remotely, then 1 layer depends on his ritual line, probably through borrowed sigils from old Moon Law, which means there's an original clause underneath he didn't write and can't fully control. "You're guessing," said one of the older masons. "I am," she said, "but I'm not wrong about him." The room held that truth for a long breath. Then Owen spoke into the silence. "From this moment, Ironhold operates as if a Blood Moon assault is certain. Double watches, no lone patrols, check every wardstone for tampering at dawn and dusk, and no infant leaves inner walls without 2 armed escorts." He looked at Arabella as he gave the final order. She joined Strategy Council, effective now. No one argued aloud, but as wolves scattered to carry commands, Arabella caught the old reactions anyway. Unease, suspicion, the whisper of, because of her, threaded through fear of, because she was right. Dante hadn't just threatened her. He'd weaponized her existence. Night settled hard and restless over Ironhold. Owen took her straight from the hall to the eastern line with 2 sentries, a lantern, and a satchel of chalk and silver filings. Frost snapped under their boots as they crouched at wardstone 9, 10, 11, checking seams for cuts and old blood for false binding. At marker 12, Arabella brushed back wet moss and found a shallow spiral scored into the base, so fine it vanished unless moonlight hit it sideways. Cult anchors, Owen said, crouched in freezing mud while she sketched the pattern onto scrap vellum. Someone's been in our lines. Not someone, Arabella said. Many someones. These aren't random placements. They're a lattice. They burned the mark out with salt and moon water, then reset the stone with blood from sworn adults. By the time they reached the inner stairs again, both their hands were nicked raw and blackened with ash. Dawn broke dirty gray. A shepherd den to the north sent smoke signal warning of ferals massing in the ravines. Owen rerouted 2 patrols before finishing his first cup of bitter bark tea. Arabella stood over the map table beside him, tracing likely approach lines with a charcoal nub while runners came and went at a trot. By midday, a trader caravan from the west rattled through Ironhold's shattered gate with 2 wagons and no children, eyes hollow, saying Blood Moon riders had offered escort in exchange for future Firstborn contracts. Arabella listened from the edge of the questioning circle, every word dragging old memories like hooks through her ribs. At mess fires, conversations stopped when she approached, then restarted in lower tones after she passed. By evening, she was at the forge, scraping rust from a short blade while sparks lit the rafters. Bren stood 2 stations down, shoulders hunched over a bent hinge. She heard him tell another male, "If he wants her so badly, maybe giving 1 wolf saves 50. Bren caught her hearing and looked away first. Progress, she thought bitterly. Owen heard too. His shoulders went rigid, but he did not explode this time. He walked to Bren, said something too low for others to hear, and Bren went chalk white and spent the rest of the night hauling stone in silence. Later, on the west wall, Owen handed Arabella a cup of thin broth gone lukewarm and said, "I can exile every loud mouth in this place and still not erase fear." She stared out at the dark pines beyond the broken parapet. Fear's not the problem. What people do with it is. Wind lifted a loose strand of his hair. He reached as if to tuck hers behind her ear, then stopped halfway and dropped his hand to the wall instead. "You're allowed to hate all of this." "I do." "Me too." The simple confession made something in her chest ease and ache at the same time. Their attraction grew in inconvenient places, shoulder to shoulder over maps, while their scents tangled in lamplight. Knees brushing under the strategy table when everyone leaned in at once. His voice at her back in the armory, asking, "May I?" before adjusting the fit of a borrowed vambrace because he'd seen it pinch her wrist. Every time her body answered before her mind, heat, pull, that dangerous sense of rightness. Every time, fear snapped up after, sharp as wire. Dante had once sounded gentle in private too. Dante had once said, "Trust me," with his mouth against her pulse. So she held her distance with both hands and called it caution. Before first light, a pair of ravens landed on Ironhold's inner post with strips of cured skin tied to their legs. Not parchment, skin. Each strip bore the same message burned in tiny script, "Firstborns or fire." Tamsin burned them without reading aloud, face gone hard and old. By afternoon, 2 wardstones on the southern line flared bright silver, then died to black in the span of a breath. Wolves on watch swore they heard children crying from the tree line, thin and far away, though no tracks were found in the snow. At sunset, a Crown courier arrived breathless with partial eclipse reports. 4 minor packs petitioning emergency aid after ritual outages, all of them recently visited by Blood Moon emissaries. The noose tightened, knot by knot. And still, each night, when Arabella finally stumbled back to her room, she found the corridor swept, her water basin refilled, and fresh charcoal beside her hearth. Small practical mercies with no name attached, except she recognized the way Owen folded cloth corners, precise, square, soldier neat. He never mentioned doing it. She never thanked him aloud. Not yet. The moon hid behind cloud the night she found him at the moonwell. Ironhold's old well sat in a cracked courtyard behind the infirmary, ringed with weather-worn stones carved in faded lunar script. Most wolves passed it without looking. Too many bad years had made prayer feel like a luxury. Arabella came because she couldn't sleep, and because her chest felt too tight for walls. Owen was already there, seated on the low rim with his injured hand submerged in the cold glow water up to the wrist. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering before he masked it. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. She wrapped her arms around herself against the night air. "I dreamed of chains." He shifted, making room on the stone, and waited. Permission, not pressure. Arabella sat, leaving a handspan between them. For a while they listened to distant hammers from the night crew and the soft drip of water in the well throat. The bond hummed quietly, less blaze than thread tonight. Owen flexed his fingers underwater and winced. "Sprain this resetting east marker. Tamsin says I'm dramatic. She says that to everyone." "Fair?" Silence again. "Easy this time." Then Arabella heard herself ask, "Who did you lose?" He didn't pretend not to understand. "My den, first. Fever winter. Then my beta pair in the past collapse. Then Ironhold title. When the old alliance cut us loose after the ward breach." He looked at the water, voice roughened but steady. "People call me stubborn for rebuilding ruins. Truth is, I didn't know what else to do with my hands if I stopped." She swallowed around the ache in his words. "I'm sorry." "Me too." He pulled his hand from the well and rested both forearms on his knees. "Your turn, only if you want." Arabella stared at the pale scars crossing her burned palms. Dante used to ask what kind of mother I'd be, as if it was a game. What names I liked? Whether our pups would have my eyes. Her laugh came out thin and furious, all while negotiating to hand over our first child like livestock. Owen's jaw tightened, wolf flashing briefly in his scent. He said nothing. She kept going, because stopping now would hurt more. After he rejected me, the worst part wasn't the crowd. It was one thought, over and over. She pressed fist to sternum as if to hold herself together. That maybe I should have seen it sooner. Maybe being blindsided means something in me is broken. Maybe I'm not fit to choose anyone. Owen turned toward her fully but still didn't touch. Being betrayed is not a character flaw. Her eyes burned. "It feels like one?" "I know." His voice dropped. "But it isn't." She looked at him then. Really looked. At the scar through his brow, the mortar embedded in his knuckles that never seemed to wash out, the disciplined stillness he wore around her like armor against his own instincts. "Why haven't you pushed?" she asked quietly. Most males would use the bond, argue urgency, claim rights. His answer was immediate. "Because I'd rather die unmated than become another cage." The words cracked something open in her. Arabella exhaled shakily and, before she could overthink it, lifted her hand from her lap and turned it palm up on the stone between them. An offering. A test. Owen looked at her hand like it was sacred and dangerous all at once. "May I?" She nodded. He placed his calloused palm over hers, gentle, warm, no pressure beyond contact. Bonfire leapt, silver hot, then settling into a deep, steady pulse that spread up her arm and into the hollow places under her ribs. No demand, no claim, just presence. Arabella closed her eyes and let herself lean, just slightly, until her shoulder touched his. He made a small, startled sound she felt more than heard, then relaxed into it. They sat like that in the dark, two battered wolves at an old well, breathing in sync while the world sharpened its knives outside the walls. When she finally stood, she didn't step back immediately. "I'm still afraid," she said. "Good," he replied. "Fear means you're paying attention." A real smile tugged at her mouth. "That's not exactly romantic." "Best I've got." She almost laughed. Instead, she squeezed his hand once before letting go. Her walls didn't fall all at once, but one gate unlatched. The strike came at dawn. First, the eastern siren, high and urgent, not the low roll of messenger call. Wolves jolted awake across Ironhold. Arabella was halfway into her boots when a second siren answered from the south, then a third from the north in terrifying succession. 3 lines hit at once. She ran to the command hall with her hair unbound and knives strapped crooked. Owen converging from the opposite corridor already in partial shift. Eyes lit gold. "Report!" he barked. A watch captain skidded in, mud to his knees. "East boundary stone 12 just went dark. Then 13. We're reading cascade failure." Another voice from the stairwell. "South ravine sighted feral movement. Dozens. Maybe more." Tamsin shoved through, carrying a blood-soaked bundle that resolved into an adult courier, barely breathing. "Found him at gatepost," she snapped. "Pinned there with this." She ripped a black-fletched arrow from the courier's cloak and threw it on the map table. A strip of parchment was tied beneath the shaft. Bone-wax seal. Spiral crescent. Arabella's stomach dropped before Owen broke it. Same hand. Same elegant cruelty. Clock starts at moonrise. Bring Arabella Shadowfang to the central field, kneeling, throat bared. Bring proof of surrender of any life she carries now or will carry. Refuse, and I open your wards to what waits beyond them. Let your pack watch and learn what mothers owe. Below it, an addendum in different ink. Anchor already placed inside Ironhold. You cannot cut what you cannot find. Owen slammed his fist onto the table hard enough to rattle cups. "Sweep every structure now." "As if we have time," said a sentry, voice thin with panic. "If anchors are internal?" A boom cut him off, not thunder, stone cracking. The hall floor shuddered under their feet. Dust sifted from the beams. Somewhere outside, wolves screamed. A short, shocked burst, then shouting. "West Yard!" Someone yelled from the door. Wardstone exploded. Arabella and Owen ran. The west yard looked like a cratered jaw. The secondary wardstone had split down the center, silver light leaking from the crack in wild, strobing pulses that made vision swim. 2 wolves lay motionless nearby. Healers were dragging a third away by his arms, legs trailing blood. Beyond the broken wall, the forest edge boiled with movement. Feral eyes, dozens of them, catching morning light like coins. Then more behind them, and more. A horn sounded from the north tower, continuous now, the call for breach imminent. Owen seized Arabella's shoulders, blood and dust on his hands, voice a harsh command over the chaos. "He wants you at center as a sacrifice. I can get you out through the old quarry tunnel before full breach." "No." The word came from somewhere deeper than fear. Another tremor rocked the yard. A different ward line flared and died in the distance, like a star being crushed. Runners poured in, shouting over each other. "South gate taking impact. Inner marker won't hold. Feral vanguard at the trench." Arabella looked from Owen to the shattered stone to the tree line crawling with teeth and hunger and engineered terror. Dante's message rang in her skull, mothers who deny the pack feed death. He had built this moment for her, to force kneeling, to make choice itself look like guilt. Around them, Ironhold's unfinished defenses began to fail in sequence, one bright crack at a time. And the blood moon would rise by nightfall, and the blood moon would rise by nightfall. Owen's grip tightened on Arabella's shoulders. "Listen to me. Quarry tunnel now. We regroup at the eastern ridge and retake at dawn." Another impact shook the west wall. Stone burst outward in a spray of shards. A feral leapt through the dust, jaws open, eyes milk-white with frenzy. Arabella moved first, backward. Claws raked her forearm. Owen's backward. Claws raked her forearm. Owen's wolf surged through him in a flash of fur and teeth, crushing the feral's throat before it could rip free. "Inner ring!" Owen roared to the yard. "Fall back to central yard! Shields up!" Wolves scrambled, dragging wounded, slamming barricades into place. The smell of blood thickened the air. Hot copper, wet fur, fear. From the north tower came another horn blast, then silence so sudden it felt like a held breath. A runner staggered into view, half-shifted, one ear gone. "North tower overrun?" He went down with an arrow through his back. Black-fletched. Arabella looked up in time to see figures on the outer ridge in dark cloaks, silver spiral paint on their throats. Dante's inner circle. They didn't fire to kill indiscriminately. They fired at ward posts, signal braziers, command runners. Precision chaos. "He's here," she said. Owen bared his teeth. "I know." Feral packs slammed the south trench in a writhing wave. Ironhold wolves met them with pikes and claws. Snow turned black-red beneath thrashing bodies. Near the shattered wardstone, Tamsin knelt over a fallen sentry, shouting for tourniquets, while Bren, of all wolves, stood over her with a hammer, knocking ferals off anyone who came near. Another tremor rolled through the ground, deeper than the others. The central tower lanterns flickered out. A crack of silver light ran like lightning under the yard stones toward the heart of Ironhold. Arabella felt it in her bones. "Anchor," she whispered. "Inside. Not random." He tied everything to the central ward stone. Owen followed her gaze toward the old central field, an open circle of ancient basalt where Ironhold's first oath stone stood, half-buried and usually dormant. "No," he said immediately, reading her face. "Absolutely not." A howl rose from beyond the walls, layered and wrong, wolf voices braided with ritual chant. Dante's. Arabella's wolf pressed hard against her skin, not in panic now, but recognition. Memory flashed, faded script around the moonwell, a line her grandmother had once made her repeat until she could say it in her sleep. Protection is covenant, not consumption. Dante had hidden the clause because it broke his entire doctrine. She grabbed Owen's bloody wrist. "If he bound the network through false firstborn law, we can reverse it at origin." "We don't know that." "I do." She looked him dead in the eyes. Shadowfang Line kept the lunar clauses before Blood Moon ever carved those spirals. It takes blood freely given at the center, then a sworn adult circle. Not children. Never children. A feral crashed into Owen from behind. He spun, tore it down, came up with blood spraying from his already wounded shoulder and fury burning in every line of him. "And while you stand in the center, he'll come straight for your throat." "He already is." He froze for one heartbeat. That was enough for a decision to harden in her like steel. Arabella yanked a ceremonial blade from the fallen standard post, its hilt wrapped in cracked silver wire. She shoved it into Owen's hand, then took it back and held it to her own palm. "Call everyone," she said. "Able wolves, wounded elders, anyone who can stand. If I'm wrong, we die together. If I'm right, nobody ever pays in children again." She didn't wait for permission. She ran for the central field while Ironhold burned around her. The old oathstone jutted from the center like a broken tooth, black rock veined with dead silver. By the time Arabella reached it, 3 wolves had formed a defensive arc around the circle, Bren among them, breathing hard, hammer slick with blood. "Hold perimeter," she shouted. "No one crosses this ring unless sworn." Owen arrived seconds later with a pack surge at his back. Fighters, builders, elders limping with canes, Tamsin with her sleeves rolled and jaw set, sentries carrying the barely standing. Behind them, 2 riders in crown gray pushed through the chaos and dismounted, Alpha King envoys, sigils bright on their cloaks, faces grim as they took in the scene. "Good," Arabella thought fiercely. "Watch this." The sky darkened as the moon rose, red-edged behind smoke. Blood moon. Dante's voice boomed from the broken north gate, amplified by ritual. Kneel, Arabella Shadowfang. Offer your throat and I spare the rest. She climbed the oath stone. Wind tore at her hair. Arrows hissed past the ring and clattered harmlessly against the old basalt as if repelled by memory. Arabella raised her cut-marked hand high so every wolf could see it. Hear me, Iron Hold. Hear me, Crown Witnesses. Blood moon doctrine is a lie. She sliced her palm deep. Blood welled hot and bright. She pressed it to the stone. Pain flashed white up her arm, then down through the ground like roots waking. In old lunar tongue, clear and carrying, she spoke the clause Dante had buried. By moon before fang, by oath before womb, no pack protection may be purchased with the life of a child. Wards bind only to sworn adults who choose mutual sacrifice and equal defense. The stone answered. Silver lines burst from beneath her hand, racing in concentric circles through the field. Wolves cried out as the light touched their boots, asking, not taking. Arabella threw back her head and howled. Not a distress call, a binding call. It ripped out of her like truth made sound, wild and commanding. Owen answered first, a thunder-deep alpha howl that shook the air. Then Tamsin. Then Bren, hoarse and fierce. One by one, every able wolf and every wounded elder in hearing range stepped into the ring and howled back, voices stacking until the night vibrated. Even the crown envoys joined, palms to chests in witness oath. Arabella felt the covenant take hold, not draining, not devouring, but linking, shared burden, shared wall. From the north gate came a scream of rage. Dante burst through the smoke in full wolf form, twice feral size, coat scorched dark, cult sigils burning like embers through his fur. He slammed into the edge of the circle and staggered as silver sparks snapped under his paws, then forced through by brute will. He came straight at Arabella. Owen launched to intercept. They collided midair in a crunch of bone and snarls. Dante's jaws tore across Owen's shoulder, opening flesh to the muscle. Owen hit the ground, rolled, and locked onto Dante's foreleg anyway, holding him for 2 breaths exactly. 2 breaths was all Arabella had. She dropped to one knee, smeared her blood with ash from the stone's base, and drew the final sigil across the oathstone face, a crescent crossed by 4 claw marks, the adult covenant seal. Complete, she gasped. By chosen blood, complete. The ground detonated in light. Silver chains of ward fire erupted from the sigil and wrapped Dante's limbs, throat, and spine, slamming him to the basalt. He thrashed, foam and blood flying, but every movement tightened the bonds. Around the field, Ironhold's darkened markers reignited one after another in clean white flame. Far off, feral howls broke into confused yelps as the borders slammed shut. Dante's human form flickered through the wolf shape, then forced itself fully human, naked to the waist, skin carved with spiral brands now blazing as the chains bit in. He spat blood at Arabella's boots. You sanctimonious fool! Packs need fear, not fate. Arabella stepped down from the stone, ceremonial blade in hand. Owen, bleeding heavily, rose behind Dante and hooked an arm under his throat to hold him upright against the chains. Look at me, Arabella said. Dante laughed wetly. Still playing Luna? She lifted the blade until the moon painted its edge red. You demanded firstborn blood for safety. Tonight your own blood buys truth. His smile split feral. Kill me and they'll tear each other apart by winter. She leaned close enough for him to smell her certainty. Then fear dies with you. She drove the blade through his heart. Dante convulsed once, hard. His eyes went wide, not with remorse, only disbelief that choice had left his hands. Then his body ignited from the wound outward, black flame eating flesh to cinder in seconds. The spiral marks flared brilliant and snapped dark, one by one, like a network losing power. When the flame died, only ash remained on the stones. Silence crashed down. Then, from beyond the walls, the last feral cries faded into distance as the sealed wards held. Arabella stood over the ash, chest heaving, blood dripping from her palm, while the blood moon burned overhead and did not ask for a child. Healers got to Owen before he collapsed. Tamsin and 2 assistants stitched his shoulder under lantern light in the central hall, while envoys took statements and wolves reset broken barricades with shaking hands and stunned focus. Arabella sat on an overturned crate, hands scrubbed clean except for the fresh cut in her palm, and watched every pull of needle through Owen's torn flesh like it was happening under her own skin. At one point, he caught her stare and managed, "You look worse." She snorted, half sob, half laugh. "Liar." "Mate privilege," he muttered, then hissed when Tamsin yanked a knot tight. Tamsin glared at them both. "If either of you faints before I finish, I'll bring you back just to scold you again." When she finally wrapped the bandage and shoved Owen toward a cot, Arabella stepped in. "I need the Moonwell. Private." Tamsin's brows lifted, then softened. "Go. 10 minutes before I start hunting." The Moonwell courtyard was quiet now, washed silver red. Smoke thinned above the ruins. Somewhere in the distance, wolves sang low victory, thanksgiving, ragged but real. Owen came in shirtless, bandaged shoulder bright against scarred skin, moving stiffly but upright. He stopped 3 paces away, letting her set distance. Arabella faced him fully. Her voice was steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm done being chosen for." His throat worked. "Arabella." She stepped closer and tilted her head, baring the junction of neck and shoulder to him. "I choose." The words hung between them like a vow. Owen's eyes blew gold. He did not touch her yet. "Tell me what you want." "You," she said, "as mate, as partner. No cages, no bargains over bodies that aren't ours." "Done," he whispered. She swallowed. "Then mark me." He moved like approaching an altar. Slow, reverent, every muscle tight with control. Beat against his lips. "Mine." He beat against his lips. "Mine." He breathed, not demand, but wonder. "If still, yes." Yes. His teeth sank at the mating point. Pain flashed sharp, electric, a clean piercing that made her gasp and grip his forearm hard enough to bruise. Heat followed instantly, liquid fire spilling from the bite into her veins, racing down spine and limbs, igniting every nerve. The ache transformed, opened, became fierce pleasure threaded with relief, so profound, her knees almost gave. Owen growled low against her skin, fighting instinct to bite deeper. He held exactly where her body welcomed and no farther, sealing with tongue and breath and a shudder that matched hers. The bond roared to life. Not the frantic half-thread from before. This was complete circuitry. Silver gold current flooding both ways, carrying sensation and memory in flashes. His loneliness in ruined halls, her humiliation on the wedding dais, his stubborn hands rebuilding walls, her voice at the oathstone choosing all of them. Grief met grief and did not drown. Strength met strength and locked. Owen pulled back just enough to look at her, pupils blown wide, mark glowing at her throat. "Yours," he said hoarsely. "Mate." Her wolf surged up in pure, exultant answer. Arabella grabbed the back of his neck and turned him, pressing him down just enough to bear the shoulder curve over his heart. "Hold still." His breath caught, startled. "Gods." She smiled against his skin, wild and sure. "Mine." She bit. His groan tore out rough and helpless as her teeth pierced. She tasted salt, heat, him. His hands clenched at her hips, then opened deliberately, never trapping. She held the bite through the wave of power crashing back through them. His strength, his loyalty, That iron discipline turned molten in her blood. Pain became pulse, pulse became pleasure, and then became peace. When she released, the mark on his shoulder flared silver gold to match hers. Light laced between them once, visible in the dark like a drawn bowstring, then sank beneath skin. Bond complete. They stood forehead to forehead, both breathing hard. "No one chooses for you again, Arabella Shadowfang," Owen whispered. She touched the new mark over his heart, then her own throat. "Good, because I just chose twice." He laughed breathlessly, then kissed her. Slow first, then hungry. All the held-back wanting of weeks tempered by the new steadiness humming between them. When they finally broke apart, she rested her cheek over his marked shoulder and listened to his heartbeat settle into rhythm with hers. "Mine," she murmured. "Yours," he answered. "Mate." He held her tighter, careful of her wounds, and the word echoed through the bond like home. 2 days later, under clear moon and crown banners, the Alpha King stood in Ironhold's rebuilt central yard, while every pack representative who could arrive on short notice crowded the stone tiers. Dante's ash had been swept from the oath stone, but a dark stain remained where he died. Alpha King's voice carried to the walls. By witness testimony of crown envoys, by ward record, and by surviving ritual evidence, Dante Bloodmoon is declared oathbreaker and enemy of moon law. His inner circle is stripped, hunted, and tried under crown tribunal. At the edge of the crowd, Elder Mira knelt in silver restraints, face gray and hollow. She did not look up when the king continued. "New law, binding across allied territories. No pack may demand a child, born or unborn, as protection tithe. Any such demand is treason." A murmur swelled, then broke into howls of assent. The king turned to Arabella where she stood beside Owen, marks visible and unhidden. "Arabella Shadowfang, your invocation restored lawful covenant and saved border territories beyond this ruin. I name you Luna Strategist of Ironhold by merit and by mate bond, with full authority over ward law and interpack defense accords." He looked at Owen. "Alpha Ironhold, do you contest?" Owen's answer was immediate, proudly affirmed. The king's mouth edged toward a rare smile. "Then build something worth inheriting." After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed into argument, relief, and exhausted celebration, Bren approached Arabella with awkward shoulders and clean hands. "Luna Strategist," he said, stumbling over the title. "Tamsin says my wall section passed inspection." Arabella arched a brow. "Miracles happen." He huffed what might have been a laugh. "For what it's worth, I was wrong." "I know," she said. "Keep being less wrong." He nodded and went back to hauling stone. That night, Owen and Arabella walked the ramparts together while patrol fires burned steady at every marker. No screams in the tree line, no false flare failures. Just wind, pine, and distant hammering from wolves rebuilding because they expected morning to come. Months later, under a full protected moon, Arabella labored in the same hall where she'd once bled over maps. Tamsin commanded like a battlefield general. Owen knelt at Arabella's side, letting her crush his hand without complaint, while elders chanted the adult covenant oath around them. When the baby's cry split the air, strong, furious, alive, half the hall burst into tears. Tamsin laughed wetly and laid a dark-haired newborn on Arabella's chest. "Firstborn," she said, voice thick, "defended by all, owed by none." Owen bent, forehead to Arabella's, eyes shining feral bright. "You did it, mate." "We did," she corrected, and tipped the baby so he could kiss tiny brow. At dawn, they carried their child to Ironhold's rebuilt gate. Wolves lined the path. Fighters, healers, masons, once doubters, crown witnesses, hands over hearts in silent vow. The new ward stones pulsed clean silver along the walls, tied to sworn adults and shared duty. Arabella stood beside Owen beneath fresh-hewn beams and looked out over lands no longer ruled by tribute and fear. "Ready?" Owen asked. She adjusted their child against her shoulder, marks warm where the morning light touched them. "For what?" He smiled at the horizon, then at her. "The rest of it." Arabella bared her teeth in a wolfish grin and stepped forward with him, co-rulers at a gate they had rebuilt by choice.